In a bustling coffee shop, Preston, a lonely billionaire, sat quietly huddled in his wheelchair in a secluded corner. The coffee before him had long gone cold, and his bloodshot eyes stared blankly as if he wished to vanish from the world. Just then, a young black woman named Aaliyah approached, stopped in front of him, and softly asked, "May I sit with you?" The question caught him off guard. After only a few minutes of conversation, a sense of warmth filled his chest as if a spark of life had finally returned. But Aaliyah had no idea. That encounter was never an accident, because the very next morning she would return. Look him straight in the eye and ask a question powerful enough to change everything. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The coffee shop hummed with the usual afternoon chaos: espresso machines, hissing conversations, overlapping chairs, scraping against worn hardwood floors. Preston Whitfield sat in the farthest corner wheelchair positioned against the brick wall, like he was trying to disappear into it. His coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Steam no longer rose from the ceramic mug, but he hadn't touched it anyway. His hands rested motionless on the armrests, fingers occasionally twitching as if reaching for something that wasn't there. His eyes, red-rimmed and glassy, stared at nothing in particular, or maybe at everything all at once. A young couple laughed at the table nearest him. Their joy felt like sandpaper against his raw nerves. Preston's jaw tightened. He looked down at his useless legs hidden beneath expensive slacks that would never wrinkle from actual wear. 3 years in this chair. 3 years since Elijah's funeral. 3 years since his body had simply given up. "Sir, can I get you anything else?" The barista's voice barely registered. Preston shook his head without looking up. The kid retreated quickly. Most people did around him lately. Across the shop, Aaliyah Carter checked her phone for the 3rd time. Her order was taking forever, but she didn't really mind. The community health center had been understaffed all week, and this 20-minute break felt like a luxury she couldn't afford but desperately needed. She scrolled through patient files on her phone, reviewing notes for tomorrow's sessions. Mrs. Henderson's PTSD treatment was showing progress. The Martinez family needed a follow-up. On her thumb stopped mid-scroll. Something pulled her attention away from the screen. Not something, someone. The man in the wheelchair tucked away in the corner like he was hiding from the world. Aaliyah had spent 5 years learning to read people. Body language, micro-expressions, the weight someone carried in their shoulders. It was her job, sure, but it had become instinct. She couldn't turn it off, even if she wanted to. And this man, everything about him screamed silent agony. His posture was too rigid, like he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. His hands gripped the wheelchair armrests with white-knuckled intensity. But it was his eyes that got her empty and drowning at the same time. She'd seen that look before. Too many times. On veterans who couldn't adjust to civilian life. On mothers who'd lost children. On people who'd already given up but their bodies hadn't figured it out yet. "Don't get involved, Aaliyah. You're off the clock." She tried to look away, tried to focus on her phone again, but her feet had other plans. Before her logical brain could talk her out of it, she was walking toward him. Her chai latte grew warm in her hands as she crossed the coffee shop, weaving between tables, until she stood right in front of his. Preston didn't look up. "Excuse me," Aaliyah said, her voice gentle but clear. "I know this might seem strange, but can I sit with you for a moment?" Now he looked up. Slowly, like the effort cost him something. His eyes met hers, pale blue, startling against his weathered face. For a split second, she saw him calculating, preparing to deliver whatever cold dismissal he used to keep the world at bay. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was the genuine concern in her expression. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe he was just too tired to fight. "I don't need company," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm fine." "With respect, sir, you don't look fine." Aaliyah pulled out the chair across from him without waiting for permission. "You look like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Would it be so terrible to share that weight with someone, even just for a few minutes?" Preston blinked. Nobody talked to him like this anymore. Nobody dared. "You a therapist or something?" There was no bite in his question, just curiosity. Psychologist, actually. She set her cup down and extended her hand. "Aaliyah Carter. And before you worry, this isn't a professional consultation. I'm just a person who noticed another person having a rough day." He stared at her hand for a long moment. When was the last time someone had offered him a simple handshake? Not a business deal, not an obligation, just human connection. Preston, he said, taking her hand. His grip was weak, uncertain. Just Preston. Nice to meet you, just Preston. The corner of her mouth lifted in a small smile. Despite himself, despite everything, Preston felt something crack in his chest. Not painful, more like ice beginning to thaw. I really am fine, he tried again, but with less conviction. You don't need to waste your break on a grumpy old man. Aaliyah leaned back in her chair, cradling her latte. Who says it's a waste? Maybe I'm terrible at sitting alone with my own thoughts. Maybe you're doing me a favor. That's a kind lie. It's not a lie at all. She took a sip of her drink, giving him space to breathe. Some days, the last thing I want is to be alone in my head. The noise in here, she gestured around the busy shop, it helps drown out the noise up here. She tapped her temple. Preston studied her face. She wasn't patronizing him. She wasn't performing charity. She was just there, present, real. What's your noise about? He asked before he could stop himself. Today, whether I'm doing enough, whether anything I do actually matters. She met his eyes directly. What about yours? The question hung in the air between them. Preston's throat tightened. When was the last time anyone had asked him that? Asked what he was feeling instead of what he needed, what he wanted to buy, what decisions he was making. Loss, he said finally, the words scraping out of him. Old ghosts that won't stay buried. Aaliyah nodded slowly. Those are the worst kind, the ones we carry around because we don't know how to put them down. You speak from experience. Don't we all? She smiled sadly. I lost my mother 4 years ago. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago. Grief is weird like that. Preston's chest constricted. I lost my son 3 years ago. The words came out before he could stop them. He never talked about Elijah, not with his lawyers, not with his board members, not with anyone. But here in this crowded coffee shop with a stranger who'd simply asked if she could sit down, the truth spilled out. I'm so sorry, Aaliyah said quietly. No platitudes, no empty reassurances, just acknowledgement. The worst part is I wasn't there when he needed me most. Preston's voice cracked. I was building an empire, making money I didn't need, and he was dying. By the time I paid attention, it was too late. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. I deserve to carry it. His hands trembled on the armrests. I failed him. I failed. He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat. Aaliyah reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth. Grief makes us believe we deserve punishment, but punishing yourself won't bring him back. It just keeps you stuck. Preston looked at this young woman, this stranger who'd walked into his isolated corner and refused to let him disappear. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I know pain when I see it, and I know that sometimes the bravest thing someone can do is just sit with another person in theirs. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the coffee shop continued its chaos, but their corner felt strangely peaceful. You said your name was Aaliyah, Preston asked. That's right. It's a beautiful name. My mother chose it. She was a nurse, worked night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital for 20 years. She always said names had power, that they could shape who we become. Aaliyah's expression softened with memory. She wanted me to be strong and grounded. I try to honor that. Something flickered across Preston's face, recognition maybe, or déjà vu. St. Mary says, you know it. Yes, a long time ago. He shook his head as if clearing cobwebs. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. She raised me by herself, worked double shifts, put me through college. I became a psychologist because of her. She taught me that listening to people, really listening, is one of the most powerful things you can do. Preston's eyes glistened. She taught you well. Thank you. Aaliyah glanced at her phone and sighed. I should probably get back. My break's been over for 10 minutes. Of course. Preston straightened in his wheelchair, some life returning to his posture. Thank you for this, for sitting down, for not walking past. Anytime, Preston. She stood gathering her things. And I mean that. I come here most afternoons around this time. If you're ever here and need someone to not be alone with, I'm usually around. I might take you up on that. I hope you do. She started to walk away, then paused. Preston, whatever ghosts you're carrying, you don't have to carry them alone. Okay. He nodded, not trusting his voice. As Aaliyah walked out of the coffee shop, Preston sat straighter than he had in months. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight on his chest felt just a little lighter. He picked up his cold coffee and took a sip anyway. The next morning hit Aaliyah like a freight train. The community health center on Lexington Avenue in the Bronx never slowed down, and today was no exception. "Dr. Carter, room 3 is ready for you." Aaliyah grabbed the file from the intake nurse and headed down the narrow hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Maintenance had been promising to fix them for months. The walls needed fresh paint. The chairs in the waiting room had tears in the vinyl, but none of that mattered to the people who came here. This place was their lifeline. Room 3 held Marcus Williams, a 19-year-old kid who'd witnessed his best friend get shot 3 months ago. He sat hunched in the plastic chair hoodie pulled up despite the warmth of the room. "Hey, Marcus," Aaliyah said softly, closing the door behind her. "How are you sleeping?" "I'm not." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Every time I close my eyes, I see it again. The blood, his face." Aaliyah pulled her chair closer, maintaining eye contact. "The nightmares are your mind trying to process trauma. It's normal, even though it doesn't feel that way." "Normal? There's nothing normal about watching someone die." "You're right. There isn't." She leaned forward, her presence steady and calm. "But you're still here, Marcus. You showed up today. That takes courage." For the next 40 minutes, she guided him through grounding techniques, helped him identify his triggers, reminded him that healing wasn't linear. By the time he left, his shoulders sat a little less heavy. 3 more patients followed: a mother struggling with postpartum depression, a veteran with PTSD who couldn't hold down a job, a teenage girl cutting herself to feel something other than numbness. Aaliyah listened to every word, absorbed every pain, carried every burden like it was her own. It's what made her good at her job. It's also what exhausted her. By lunchtime, she collapsed into the break room chair across from her colleague, Dr. James Morrison, a family medicine physician who'd been at the center for 15 years. "You look wiped," James said, sliding a sandwich across the table toward her. "Extra turkey. You need protein." "Thanks." Aaliyah unwrapped it, but didn't take a bite. Her mind was somewhere else. "Earth to Aaliyah," she blinked. "Sorry, just thinking about something strange happened yesterday." She set the sandwich down. "I was at the coffee shop on 5th, and I saw this man sitting alone in a wheelchair. He looked so broken, like he'd given up on everything. And I couldn't just walk past him." James raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, you went full therapist mode." "I just sat with him. We talked." She paused, searching for the right words. "James, it was the weirdest thing. I felt this connection to him. Like I'd known him before, even though I'd never seen him in my life." "Connection how?" "I don't know how to explain it. When he talked about losing his son, I felt his pain like it was mine. And his eyes." She stopped, realizing how it sounded. "Never mind. It's crazy." "Empathy isn't crazy. It's your superpower." James took a bite of his sandwich. "Did you get his name?" "Preston." "Just Preston." "Last name?" He didn't offer one. "And I didn't ask." Aaliyah finally bit into her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "He mentioned his son died 3 years ago. Said he wasn't there when it mattered most. You could see the guilt eating him alive. Sounds like he needs more than a coffee shop conversation." "I told him I'm there most afternoons, if he wants to talk again." She met James's eyes. "Is that weird, inviting a stranger to share my breaks?" "Weird maybe, but that's who you are, Aaliyah. You see people others ignore. Don't apologize for that." The afternoon sessions blurred together. By 6 o'clock, Aaliyah was running on fumes. She grabbed her bag, said goodnight to the skeleton crew working the evening shift, and headed home. The apartment she shared with her grandmother sat on the 4th floor of a walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The elevator had been broken for 2 years. Aaliyah climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. "Grandma Ruby, I'm home." Ruby Carter sat in her usual spot by the window, knitting needles clicking rhythmically. At 78, she moved slower than she used to, but her mind stayed sharp as ever. "Baby girl, you look exhausted." Ruby set down her knitting. "Did you eat?" "I had a sandwich at work." Aaliyah dropped her bag and moved to the small kitchen. "Did you take your blood pressure medication?" "Not yet." "Grandma, I was waiting for you to remind me." Ruby's smile was mischievous. Aaliyah poured a glass of water and brought the pill organizer to her grandmother. "You can't skip these. Doctor's orders." "Yes, ma'am." Ruby took the pills, then patted the couch beside her. "Come sit with me. Tell me about your day." Aaliyah sank into the worn cushions, grateful to be off her feet. The usual chaos. Marcus is still struggling with nightmares. Mrs. Patel finally agreed to try medication for her depression. And I met someone yesterday. Someone? Ruby's eyes sharpened. What kind of someone? Not like that grandma. Just a man at the coffee shop who looked like he needed someone to talk to. Aaliyah kicked off her shoes. His name was Preston. White guy, probably in his 60s, in a wheelchair. We just talked for a bit. The glass slipped from Ruby's hand. Dot water and pills scattered across the hardwood floor, the glass shattering into pieces. Grandma! Aaliyah jumped up. Are you okay? Ruby's face had gone ashen. Her hands trembled violently. What did you say his name was? Preston. Are you hurt? Did any glass? Preston what? Ruby's voice came out sharp, almost panicked. What was his last name? I don't know. He didn't say. Aaliyah knelt, picking up the larger shards of glass. Why are you so upset? Where did you meet him? What did he look like exactly? The coffee shop on 5th and Madison. White hair, pale blue eyes, maybe 6 feet tall if he could stand. Why does it matter? Ruby grabbed Aaliyah's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me very carefully, baby. You cannot see that man again. Do you understand me? What, Grandma? You're scaring me. Promise me, Aaliyah. Promise me you won't go back to that coffee shop. You won't talk to him again. I don't understand. Promise me. Ruby's voice cracked with desperation. Aaliyah had never seen her grandmother like this. Ruby was the strongest person she knew, the woman who'd raised her alone after Linda died, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, who never let anything shake her. But right now, she looked terrified. Okay, Aaliyah said slowly. I promise. Ruby released her wrist and slumped back against the couch, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. Good, that's good. Are you going to tell me why? Not tonight. I'm tired. Ruby closed her eyes. Clean up this mess and help me to bed. 2 hours later, Aaliyah lay awake in her small bedroom staring at the ceiling. Her grandmother's reaction played on repeat in her mind. The terror in Ruby's eyes. The way she'd practically begged for that promise. Something wasn't right. Aaliyah rolled out of bed and moved quietly to the closet. On the top shelf, tucked in a cardboard box, sat her mother's belongings. She'd only looked through them once after Linda died. The grief had been too raw. But now, 4 years later, maybe she could handle it. She pulled down the box and sat cross-legged on the floor. Photos. A nurse's badge from St. Mary's Hospital, a silver necklace, a worn journal with Linda's handwriting filling the pages. Aaliyah flipped through the journal carefully. Most entries were mundane shift notes, grocery lists reminders. But tucked between 2 pages near the middle, she found a photograph. Half a photograph, someone had torn it down the center. The remaining half showed a man's hand resting on a table, strong, well-manicured fingers, and on the ring finger, a distinctive signet ring. Even in the faded photo, Aaliyah could make out the engraved design, a shield with the letter W. In the center, surrounded by ornate scrollwork, she turned the photo over. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, the only good thing. Aaliyah's heart hammered in her chest. Who was this man? Why had her mother kept only half the photo? And why did that ring look so expensive, so aristocratic? She pulled out her phone and typed, signet ring with W shield symbol. The search results loaded. The Whitfield family crest. One of the wealthiest families in the country. Old money. Real estate empire. And the current patriarch. Aaliyah's breath caught. Preston Whitfield. She stared at the photo again, at that ring on the stranger's hand. Could it be the same Preston, the broken man in the coffee shop? Her grandmother's panic suddenly made terrible sense. Ruby knew something. Something about Preston, about Linda, about secrets that had been buried for 25 years. Aaliyah looked at the closed door of Ruby's bedroom. She'd made a promise not to see Preston again. But she hadn't promised not to find out the truth. Tomorrow, she'd go back to that coffee shop. And this time, she'd have questions Preston Whitfield needed to answer. Preston was already there when Aaliyah walked into the coffee shop the next afternoon. Same corner table, same wheelchair positioning. But this time his coffee was fresh and steaming, and his eyes tracked her the moment she entered. You came back, he said as she approached. I said I would. Aaliyah set her bag down and pulled out the chair across from him. No pleasantries, no dancing around it. Though I'm starting to think our meeting wasn't as random as I thought. Preston's expression shifted. What do you mean? Preston Whitfield. She watched his face carefully. That's your full name, isn't it? He went very still. How did you? My mother was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, Linda Grant. Does that name mean anything to you?" The color drained from Preston's face. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles went white. "Linda," he whispered. "You're Linda's daughter. So you did know her." "Know her," Preston's voice cracked. "I loved her. God help me, I loved her more than I've ever loved anyone." Aaliyah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then why did she raise me alone? Why didn't you—" "Because I was a coward." Preston looked away, shame coloring every word. "My father found out about us. Old money, old prejudices. He couldn't stomach the idea of his son with a black woman. He threatened to destroy her to make sure she never worked as a nurse again. So I let her go. I thought I was protecting her." "You abandoned her?" "Yes." The word came out broken. "The biggest mistake of my life. I married someone my father approved of, built the empire he wanted, played the part of the dutiful son. And Linda." His voice caught. "I heard she died 4 years ago. Cancer. By the time I found out, it was too late to even say goodbye." Aaliyah sat back, processing. Her mother had loved this man. This broken billionaire in a wheelchair had been the father figure she'd never known. "She never told me about you," Aaliyah said quietly. "Not once. She was protecting you. From my world, from my family, from all the ugliness that comes with the Whitfield name." Preston finally met her eyes again. "But you asked about Elijah yesterday. My son. You said you lost him 3 years ago. Leukemia. He was only 12. Preston's hands trembled. "I threw money at the best doctors, the best treatments. None of it mattered. I watched my boy waste away in a hospital bed, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to save him. I'm so sorry." His mother, my ex-wife, Victoria, she blamed me. Said I'd brought this curse on our family because of my past sins. Maybe she was right. Preston gestured to his legs. "The day we buried Elijah, something in me just shut down. The doctors say there's no physical reason I can't walk. It's all in my head. Psychosomatic paralysis, they call it." Aaliyah leaned forward. "Trauma can manifest physically. Your body is protecting you from grief you're not ready to face." 3 years, and I'm still not ready. Preston's laugh was bitter. "I built a $50 billion empire, but I can't figure out how to get out of this chair." "Healing isn't about figuring it out. It's about feeling it." She paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you come back here to this coffee shop?" Preston was quiet for a long moment. "Because for the first time in 3 years, someone saw me as just a man. Not a billionaire, not a failure as a father, not a man in a wheelchair. You sat down and asked if I needed someone to talk to. Nobody's done that in a very long time." "I grew up without a father," Aaliyah said softly. "My whole childhood I wondered what was wrong with me, that he didn't want to stay. My mom worked herself to death trying to be enough for both parents. I watched her sacrifice everything. I'm sorry you had to go through that. So am I. But it taught me something. We all carry loss differently. Some of us work ourselves to exhaustion. Some of us shut down completely. Neither way is wrong. It's just survival." Preston studied her face, seeing echoes of Linda in the curve of her jaw, the steadiness of her gaze. "You have her strength, her compassion." "I try." Aaliyah wrapped her hands around her cup. She would have wanted me to help people carrying the kind of pain she carried. That's why I became a psychologist. You're good at it. Better than any therapist I've paid thousands of dollars an hour. That's because I'm not your therapist. I'm just someone who understands. They talked for 2 hours about loss and regret, about the weight of expectations and the crushing guilt of failing the people you love, about small joys, good coffee, unexpected kindness, moments of connection in a disconnected world. When the coffee shop staff started stacking chairs around them, Preston cleared his throat. "I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Come to my home every evening if you can spare the time, just to talk like this. I'll pay you whatever rate you charge." "Preston, I know how this sounds, but these past 2 days, talking with you, it's the first time I've felt human in 3 years. I need that. I need someone who sees me, not the money or the name or the wheelchair." Aaliyah hesitated. Every professional instinct told her this was crossing a line. But her gut, the same gut that had made her sit down with him in the first place, said something different. "I'll come," she said finally, "but not for money. As a friend. Friends don't charge each other for conversation." "Aaliyah, I can't ask you to do that for free." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She met his eyes firmly. "If we're going to do this, we do it as equals. No transaction, no obligation. Just 2 people helping each other carry what's heavy. Deal." Preston's eyes glistened. "Deal." Good. Now give me your address and I'll come by tomorrow after work. He recited the address of his estate in the suburbs. Aaliyah plugged it into her phone, already dreading the conversation she'd have to have with her grandmother about breaking her promise. As she stood to leave, Preston reached out and caught her hand. Thank you for not walking past me, for seeing me when I'd made myself invisible. Thank you for letting me sit down. She squeezed his hand gently. See you tomorrow, Preston. That night, Preston sat in his study, staring at an old photograph he kept in his desk drawer. Linda, young and vibrant in her nurse's scrubs, laughing at something he'd said. He'd taken the photo secretly 26 years ago before everything fell apart. He pulled out his phone and called his personal physician. Dr. Matthews, it's Preston Whitfield. I need you to run every test possible on my legs again. Everything. Mr. Whitfield, we've done this before. There's no physical. I know what you've told me, but something's changing. I can feel it. Preston flexed his toes, or thought he did. A tingling sensation ran through his right foot, faint, but undeniable. Today, for the first time in 3 years, I felt something. A spark, like my body's waking up. That's remarkable. What changed? Preston looked at Linda's photo, then at the empty doorway where Aaliyah had stood moments before leaving. I found a reason to want to stand again. After he hung up, Preston wheeled himself to the window overlooking his empty estate. 30 rooms, 10 acres, more wealth than 3 generations could spend. And until 2 days ago, he'd been ready to die in this chair alone with his guilt dot. But Aaliyah had walked into that coffee shop and reminded him what it felt like to be human, to be seen, to be worthy of someone's time and attention without needing to buy it. His legs tingled again, stronger this time. Dot tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Gerald Moss had been Preston Whitfield's private investigator for 12 years. He'd tracked down corporate spies, vetted potential business partners, and quietly disposed of scandals before they reached the media. But this assignment felt different. You want me to investigate who? Gerald asked, leaning forward in the leather chair across from Preston's desk. Aaliyah Carter, 25-year-old psychologist at the Community Health Center on Lexington. Preston slid a folder across the mahogany surface. I need to know everything about her. Family history, education, medical records, if you can access them. Gerald opened the folder, studying the photo Preston had somehow obtained. Mind telling me why? She's Linda Grant's daughter. Gerald's eyebrows shot up. He'd been with Preston long enough to know that name to understand the significance. The nurse from St. Mary's, the woman your father. Yes. Preston cut him off sharply. Linda died 4 years ago. But her daughter showed up at a coffee shop and sat down with me like fate put her there. Gerald, when I look at her, I see Linda. The same eyes, the same mannerisms, even the way she tilts her head when she's listening. You think there's more to this connection? I don't know what I think. That's why I need you to find out. Preston wheeled himself to the window. Be discreet. I don't want her to know she's being investigated. Understood. Gerald stood tucking the folder under his arm. I'll start tonight. Gerald. Preston's voice stopped him at the door. If you find something, anything that connects her to me beyond Linda, I need to know immediately. You'll be the first call I make. 3 days later, Aaliyah stood in Preston's private library, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves, packed with first editions and leather-bound volumes. Preston had asked her to help organize some old papers while they talked. He claimed the company helped him focus. Your collection is incredible, Aaliyah said, running her fingers along the spines. Some of these must be worth a fortune. Money I don't need to buy books I'll never read. Preston sat by the fireplace, a blanket across his lap. My father started this library. I just maintained it out of obligation. Aaliyah pulled down a stack of folders from a high shelf, nearly dropping them when dust cascaded over her face. Jesus, when was the last time anyone touched these? Probably before Elijah was born. Preston's voice went soft at his son's name, the way it always did. She settled on the floor, sorting through yellowed documents and faded photographs, bank statements from the 80s, property deeds, letters in flowing cursive she could barely read. Then she found the bundle tied with a frayed ribbon, unsent letters, dozens of them, all addressed to the same person, Linda Grant, St. Mary's Hospital, New York. Aaliyah's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated 26 years ago. My dearest Linda, I know I have no right to write to you after what I've done. My father has made his position clear. You and I can never be together. But I need you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. You are the only woman I've ever truly loved. She looked up at Preston, who was staring into the fire, oblivious. Her heart hammered as she kept reading. The baby is due in 3 months. I wish I could be there. I wish I could hold our child and tell them about their mother's strength and beauty. But my father's threats are real. If I pursue you, he'll destroy your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for. Aaliyah's vision blurred. Baby? Our child. 3 months. She was born 25 years ago, 3 months after this letter was written. Preston? Her voice came out strangled. He turned, concern crossing his face. What's wrong? She held up the letters with shaking hands. What baby were you writing about? The color drained from his face. Where did you find those? Answer the question. What baby? Preston gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. Linda was pregnant when I left her. My father found out and... He stopped, the memory clearly painful. He told me the baby died, stillborn. Linda was devastated, and I wasn't allowed to even visit her. By the time I defied him and went to the hospital, she'd already left, disappeared. I never saw her again. The baby died. Aaliyah stood, the letters clutched against her chest. Are you absolutely certain? My father showed me the death certificate. He handled everything, the hospital bills, the burial arrangements. He said it was a mercy that a mixed-race child would have suffered in his world anyway. Preston's voice turned bitter. I believed him because I was too much of a coward to question him. Aaliyah's mind raced. The torn photograph, her grandmother's terror, the payoff her mother had taken. It all pointed to one impossible conclusion. Meanwhile, across town, Gerald Moss sat in a dimly lit office surrounded by 26 years of meticulously uncovered documents. Hospital records, birth certificates, bank transactions, and finally, the smoking gun, a receipt from Preston's father's personal accountant dated 25 years and 7 months ago. Payment to Linda Grant, $50,000. Notation, confidentiality agreement. Baby girl, permanent silence. Gerald's stomach turned. He'd worked for the Whitfield family long enough to know how ruthless the old man had been, but this was something else entirely. He pulled up Aaliyah Carter's birth certificate, born at St. Mary's Hospital, mother Linda Grant, father unknown. The timeline matched perfectly. Gerald reached for his phone, then paused. This information would destroy Preston, but it might also be the key to healing him. He dialed. Gerald Preston answered on the first ring. Did you find something? Sir, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting. Then brace yourself. Gerald took a deep breath. Your father paid Linda Grant $50,000 25 years ago. The notation on the receipt says it was for a confidentiality agreement regarding a baby girl. Silence. Preston, are you still there? Aaliyah. Preston's voice was barely a whisper. She's the right age. The timeline fits. There's more. I found medical records from a private clinic, not St. Mary S. Your father arranged for a fake death certificate. The baby never died, sir. He took her from the hospital and gave her to Linda with the payment. He told you she was dead to make sure you'd never look for her. Preston made a sound like he'd been punched in the chest. I need DNA confirmation, Gerald continued. I can arrange for discreet testing, but I'll need a sample from both of you. Do it. Preston's voice hardened with resolve. Do it now. That same evening, Aaliyah confronted her grandmother. Ruby sat in her chair by the window, but there was no knitting tonight. She'd been expecting this conversation since the moment Aaliyah had mentioned Preston's name. Grandma, I need the truth. Aaliyah knelt in front of her holding the torn photograph. Who is my father? Ruby's eyes filled with tears. Baby girl. No more protecting me. No more secrets. I found letters Preston wrote to Mom. Letters about a baby. Their baby. Aaliyah's voice cracked. Am I that baby? Ruby's face crumpled. Linda made me promise never to tell you. She was so scared, Aaliyah. Preston's father, that man, was evil. He threatened to have Linda arrested for kidnapping, to have you taken away and put in foster care. He said he'd make sure she never worked again, that she'd end up on the street. So she took the money. She took the money to save your life. Ruby grabbed Aaliyah's hands. That man would have killed you both before he let a black grandchild carry the Whitfield name. Linda saw his eyes. She knew he meant every word, so she took the deal. She let Preston think you died and raised you herself. Does Preston know now? I don't know. But if you tell him, that family will come for you. They'll try to take everything Linda sacrificed to give you. Aaliyah pulled her hands away and stood. Preston isn't his father, and I'm not a child who needs protecting anymore. The next day, Gerald collected hair samples from a teacup Aaliyah had used at Preston's estate. He He already had Preston's DNA on file from previous medical tests. He sent everything to a private lab with instructions for a rush analysis. 72 hours. That's how long it would take to confirm what Preston's heart already knew and what Aaliyah's instincts had been screaming since she'd found those letters. Preston sat in his study that night, the unsent letters spread across his desk. He picked up his phone 3 times to call Aaliyah, and 3 times he set it back down. What would he say? "I think you might be my daughter, the child I thought died 25 years ago." His legs tingled again, stronger than before. The sensation had been building all week ever since Aaliyah started visiting, like his body knew something his mind hadn't yet accepted. Across town, Aaliyah lay awake staring at her mother's journal. She'd read every entry now, piecing together the story Linda had been too afraid to tell out loud. The love story, the pregnancy, the threats, the impossible choice between keeping her daughter and keeping her safe. In 3 days, they'd both know the truth. But deep down, in the place where instinct lives, they already did. The envelope sat on Preston's desk like a ticking bomb. White official sealed. Gerald had delivered it an hour ago with a grim expression and a single sentence: "The results are in." Preston stared at it from his wheelchair, unable to bring himself to touch it. His hands trembled in his lap. For 3 days, he'd barely slept, barely eaten, barely breathed. Every moment had been consumed by one question. Was Aaliyah his daughter? His phone buzzed. A text from Aaliyah. "I'm here. Security let me through the gate." Preston wheeled himself to the window and watched her car pull up the long driveway. She got out slowly, looking up at the mansion like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was seeing it not as his home, but as the place that might hold answers to 25 years of questions. He met her at the door himself. No butler, no staff. This moment belonged to them alone. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Aaliyah stepped inside, her eyes immediately finding the envelope on the desk visible through the open study door. "You got the results. This morning. Have you opened it?" "I was waiting for you." Preston wheeled toward the study, and she followed. "Whatever's in there, we should face it together." They entered the study, and Aaliyah closed the door behind them. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. She sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Preston picked up the envelope. His fingers struggled with the seal. "Do you want me to?" Aaliyah started. "No, I need to do this." He finally got it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the page, moving past the technical jargon to the only line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. The paper slipped from his fingers and floated to the desk. "Preston." Aaliyah's voice seemed to come from very far away. He looked up at her, and tears streamed down his face unchecked. "You're my daughter." The words broke apart in his throat. "You're my daughter, and I never knew. Linda didn't abandon me. She was protecting you. And I lost both of you because I was too weak to stand up to my father." Aaliyah sat frozen, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. 25 years, she whispered. "I'm 25 years old, Preston. I know." "Do you?" Her voice rose sharp and cutting. "Do you know what it's like to grow up without a father, to watch other kids get picked up from school by their dads while I waited alone, to wonder every single day what was so wrong with me that my own father didn't want me? Aaliyah. My mother worked herself to death. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. 3 jobs, night shifts, double shifts. She never complained, never said a word about you, but I saw it. I saw how tired she was, how scared she was. And you know what the worst part is? Preston couldn't speak, couldn't move. She loved you anyway. I found her journals, Preston, 25 years later, and she still wrote about you like you were the only man who ever mattered. She protected your memory while you were living in this..." Aaliyah gestured wildly at the opulent study, this palace, thinking she'd betrayed you. "I didn't know." The words sounded pathetic, even to his own ears. "If I'd known you were alive, but you didn't know because you didn't fight for her." Aaliyah's voice cracked. "Your father threatened her, and you just accepted it. You let him tell you your child was dead, and you believed him without question. What kind of man does that?" "A coward." Preston's voice was barely audible. "A weak, selfish coward who chose comfort over courage. You're right to hate me, Aaliyah. I hate myself." "I don't hate you." Tears ran down her face now. "I wish I did. It would be so much easier than this feeling that I finally found you, and it's 25 years too late. My mother is dead, Preston. She died without ever telling me the truth because she was still protecting me from your family. She died alone because she loved you too much to risk bringing me into your world." Preston gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, his whole body shaking. "I would give everything, every dollar, every property, every asset I own to go back and make different choices, to fight for Linda, to find you. But I can't. All I can do is tell you that I'm sorry, and I know that's not enough. It will never be enough." Aaliyah wiped her eyes roughly. "You're right. It's not enough." She turned toward the door. "Please." The word tore out of Preston like a prayer. "Please don't leave. I just found you. I can't lose you again." "You never had me to lose." Aaliyah's hand touched the doorknob. Something inside Preston snapped. Every cell in his body screamed against letting her walk out that door. This was his daughter, the child he'd mourned for 25 years, the piece of Linda he'd thought was lost forever. She was standing right there 5 feet away, and he was letting her go, just like he'd let Linda go. Not again. Never again. Preston pushed against the armrests with every ounce of strength he had. His arms trembled violently. His legs, those useless dead legs that hadn't responded in 3 years, tingled with sensation so intense it was almost painful. "Aaliyah!" he gasped. She turned back and her eyes went wide. Preston was standing, barely shakily, his legs quivering like a newborn calf, but he was standing. "What are you?" Aaliyah started. He took one step. His right leg nearly buckled, but he forced it to hold. "Preston, stop. You'll hurt yourself." Another step. The room spun around him, but he kept his eyes locked on her face. "Please sit down before you fall." The third step brought him close enough to reach for her. His legs gave out. Aaliyah lunged forward, instinctively catching him before he hit the ground. They collapsed together, her arms wrapped around him, both of them kneeling on the expensive Persian rug. Preston clutched her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. "I'm sorry," he sobbed into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I should have fought for you. I should have fought for your mother. I should have been there for every birthday, every scraped knee, every school play. I should have been your father." Aaliyah's body shook with her own sobs. She felt the desperation in his grip, heard the raw anguish in his voice. This broken man had just stood up for the first time in 3 years, not to walk toward wealth or power or comfort, but to keep her from leaving. "You stood up," she whispered. "You actually stood up. For you." Preston pulled back enough to look at her face. "Only for you. My legs wouldn't work because I didn't have a reason to stand. But watching you walk away, I couldn't let you go. I won't let you go." Fresh tears spilled down Aaliyah's cheeks. She saw her mother in his eyes, the same desperate love Linda must have felt when she made the impossible choice to raise a child alone rather than risk losing her to the Whitfield family's cruelty. "I don't know how to do this," Aaliyah admitted. "I don't know how to have a father at 25 years old." "I don't know how to be a father to a grown woman," Preston said, "but we can figure it out together, if you'll let me. If you'll give me a chance to be what I should have been all along." Aaliyah looked at this man, this stranger who was also her father. She thought about her mother's journals, about Linda's unwavering love for Preston, despite everything. She thought about the patients she'd counseled through trauma and loss, the advice she'd given about forgiveness and healing. Could she take her own advice? Could she forgive him for sins he'd committed in ignorance? "My mother loved you," she said finally. "Even at the end she loved you. I found letters she never sent, photos she kept hidden. She never told me about you because she was protecting me, but she never stopped hoping you'd find us somehow." Preston's breath hitched. "Linda was the best person I ever knew." She was. Aaliyah helped him sit back against the desk, his legs still too weak to support him. "And she would want us to try. She'd want me to give you a chance." "Does that mean—" "It means I'm not leaving." Aaliyah settled beside him on the floor, neither of them making any move to get up. "It means we start from here right now, and we figure this out, one day at a time." Preston reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." A small smile tugged at her lips despite the tears. "But you're stuck with me anyway." They sat there on the floor of his study, holding hands like they were both afraid to let go. Father and daughter separated by 25 years of lies and reunited by an investigation neither of them had wanted but both had needed. "Can I ask you something?" Preston said after a long silence. "Anything." "Would you?" His voice wavered. "Would you call me Dad someday when you're ready? You don't have to now, I just—" "Dad." The word felt strange in her mouth, foreign and familiar at once. Preston's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Say it again." "Dad," Aaliyah repeated, and this time it felt right. "You're my dad." He pulled her into another embrace, and they held each other while 25 years of loss and longing finally began to heal. The boardroom of Whitfield Industries occupied the entire top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. 23 members of the board of directors sat around an obsidian table worth more than most people's houses, and every single one of them looked furious. Preston stood at the head of the table, leaning heavily on a mahogany cane. His legs still trembled after more than 5 minutes upright, but he refused to sit. "Not for this. This is absurd, Preston." Thomas Whitfield, his second cousin, slammed his palm on the table. "You can't seriously expect us to accept this." "Accept what exactly?" Preston's voice was dangerously calm. "That I have a daughter, that she's my rightful heir. A daughter from some nurse." Another board member, Margaret Chen, who'd served with Preston's father, stood up, her face twisted with disdain. "A illegitimate child you never even acknowledged until last week. This reeks of a con, Preston. Some woman probably saw dollar signs and fabricated—" "Choose your next words very carefully, Margaret." Preston's knuckles went white on the cane. "You're talking about my daughter. DNA doesn't lie. Aaliyah is a Whitfield, whether you like it or not." "A Whitfield," Thomas laughed bitterly. "She grew up in the slums, Preston. She has no business education, no understanding of our world, no." The boardroom door opened. Aaliyah walked in wearing a simple navy dress and carrying a leather briefcase. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. She'd dealt with prejudice her whole life, but never from people in $1,000 suits sitting in rooms that cost more than her annual salary. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, moving to stand beside Preston. "Traffic was terrible." The silence was deafening. Preston reached out and squeezed her hand. "Everyone, this is Dr. Aaliyah Carter, my daughter." "Doctor?" Thomas's eyebrow arched mockingly. "What kind of doctor?" "Psychology." Aaliyah met his gaze without flinching. "I work at a community health center in the Bronx, treating patients with trauma, PTSD, and mental health crises. Most of them can't afford private care." "How noble." Margaret's tone dripped with sarcasm. "And now you want to play businesswoman." "I don't want to play anything." Aaliyah set her briefcase on the table and opened it, pulling out a thick folder. "I spent the last week reviewing Whitfield Industries' financial statements, charitable contributions, and corporate structure. I also consulted with 3 independent analysts about optimal resource allocation." That got their attention. "This corporation generates $4.2 billion in annual revenue." Aaliyah continued, her voice steady and professional. "Your charitable giving amounts to 0.03% of that. Meanwhile, you spend $18 million annually on executive retreats and corporate parties." "What's your point?" Thomas demanded. "My point is that this company has lost sight of its responsibility to the community that made its success possible. I'm not here to take your money or play corporate games. I'm here to propose a fundamental shift in how Whitfield Industries operates." She pulled out a presentation folder and slid it across the table. "I want to establish a network of mental health clinics in underserved communities across the country. Free therapy, psychiatric care, crisis intervention. We fund it through a reallocation of existing resources and a modest reduction in shareholder dividends." The room erupted. "You want us to cut dividends?" Margaret looked apoplectic. "Do you have any idea how—" "I know exactly what I'm asking." Aaliyah didn't raise her voice, but something in her tone cut through the chaos. "I'm asking you to prioritize people over profit, to use this company's resources to actually help the communities you've extracted wealth from for generations. This isn't charity, it's justice." "This is insanity." Thomas stood up, addressing Preston directly. "You're going to let this girl, this outsider, walk in here and tell us how to run a company that's been in our family for 3 generations. 4 generations, actually," Preston corrected. "And yes, I am." "Because she's right." The room fell silent again. Preston shifted his weight on the cane, his legs aching, but holding firm. "My father built this empire on the backs of people he considered beneath him. He destroyed lives, including my own, because he valued money and status over humanity. I've spent 3 years in a wheelchair, paralyzed by guilt and grief, because I was too weak to stand up to him when it mattered." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "But I'm standing now. And I'm telling you that Aaliyah Carter is my daughter, my heir, and the future of this company. Anyone who has a problem with that can submit their resignation effective immediately." "You can't be serious," Margaret whispered. "I've never been more serious in my life." Preston's voice rang with authority he hadn't felt in years. "Aaliyah isn't here because of her last name or her DNA. She's here because she has something none of us have, a moral compass that actually points north. She sees people, not assets. She understands suffering because she's lived it." "So, we're supposed to just hand over a multi-billion-dollar corporation to someone with no business experience?" Thomas's face was red. "This is corporate suicide." "No." Aaliyah stepped forward. "You're supposed to recognize that true leadership isn't about protecting wealth. It's about using power responsibly. I don't want to run day-to-day operations. I want to ensure this company does right by the people it affects. That's all." "And if we refuse?" Margaret challenged. Preston straightened to his full height, despite the tremor in his legs. "Then I will personally see to it that every person in this room is replaced. I still control 51% of voting shares. This isn't a negotiation, it's a notification. Aaliyah is a Whitfield. Anyone who insults my daughter insults me." The message was clear. The room stayed silent. Thomas gathered his papers and stood. "This is a mistake you'll regret, Preston." He walked out without another word. 3 other board members followed him. Preston didn't flinch. "Anyone else?" No one moved. "Good. We'll reconvene next week to discuss the specifics of Aaliyah's proposal. Meeting adjourned." He tapped his cane on the floor with finality. As the room emptied, Aaliyah leaned close to Preston. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. They needed to understand that you're not negotiable." He smiled tiredly. "How'd I do?" "You were terrifying, in a good way." She steadied him as his legs threatened to give out. "Come on, Dad, let's get you sitting down before you collapse." Later that week, Preston's town car pulled up to the 4th-floor walk-up where Aaliyah had grown up. He stared up at the building so different from his estate, it might as well have been another planet. Gerald helped him out of the car. Preston refused the wheelchair, leaning on his cane instead. "Wait here. I need to do this alone." "Sir, the stairs." "I'll manage." Preston started toward the entrance, each step deliberate and painful. 4 flights had never seemed so daunting. By the time he reached Aaliyah's door, he was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. But he'd made it on his own 2 feet. Ruby answered his knock. She stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. "Mrs. Carter," Preston said quietly, "may I come in?" Ruby stepped aside without a word. The apartment was tiny, shabby, warm. Photos of Aaliyah covered every surface. School pictures, graduation, her first day at the health center. A life Preston had missed entirely. "She's not here," Ruby said, closing the door. "She's at work." "I know. I came to see you." Preston lowered himself carefully into a chair, his legs screaming with relief. "I owe you an apology that's 25 years overdue." Ruby sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "You owe me nothing. You owe Linda everything, and she's dead." "You're right, but you're the one who raised my daughter when I should have been there. You're the one who protected her from my family's poison. You did everything I failed to do." "I did what Linda asked me to do," Ruby said stiffly. "I kept that baby safe from people like you." "People like me?" Preston nodded slowly. "You mean cowards. Men who choose comfort over courage, who let the people they love suffer rather than fight for them." Ruby's expression softened slightly. "Linda loved you until the day she died. Did you know that she never said your name, never told Aaliyah about you, but I found her crying over your picture more times than I can count?" Preston's eyes burned. "I would give anything to take back what I did, what my father did, the pain my family caused yours. You can't give back time, Mr. Whitfield, and you can't undo 25 years of Aaliyah wondering why her father didn't want her. I know, but I can be here now. I can be the father she deserves, even if it's too late." Preston leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, Ruby Aaliyah wants you to come live at the estate. She's worried about you climbing these stairs, about you being alone." "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity, it's family." Preston met her eyes. "You're Aaliyah's grandmother. That makes you family. Please, let me do this one thing right." Ruby studied his face for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Linda made me promise to protect Aaliyah from your world. Can you promise me you'll do the same, that you won't let those vultures on your board hurt her? I'll protect her with everything I have. I swear it." Ruby nodded slowly. "Then I'll come, but not for you, for her. That's all I'm asking." 2 weeks later, the three of them sat around Preston's dining table, a table that normally seated 20, but tonight held only 3 place settings pushed close together at one end. Preston had ordered takeout from the diner near Aaliyah's old apartment. No chef, no servers, no pretense. Just fried chicken mashed potatoes and green beans in styrofoam containers. Ruby took a bite and laughed. This tastes exactly like the food from Joe's Diner on Lexington. That's because it is from Joe's Diner, Aaliyah said, grinning. Dad drove all the way there himself to pick it up. 45 minutes in traffic, Preston admitted. Worth every second. They ate and talked about nothing important. Ruby's knitting project, Aaliyah's difficult patient that morning, Preston's physical therapy progress. Simple conversation, the kind families have when they're just being together. At one point, Ruby reached across and squeezed Preston's hand. Linda would be happy to see this, to see you fighting for our girl. Preston's voice thickened. I wish she were here. She is, Aaliyah said softly, looking at both of them. In every choice we make to do better than the past. She's here. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 people from completely different worlds, bound together by love and loss and the hard work of forgiveness. The boundaries between rich and poor, between past and present, melted away. What remained was simply family. 18 months later, Preston stood in front of a modest brick building in the Bronx, watching workers install the final piece of signage above the entrance. Linda Grant Community Mental Health Center. Aaliyah stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. She would have loved this. She deserved this, Preston said, his voice thick with emotion. A monument to everything, she was compassionate, selfless, dedicated to helping people who had nowhere else to turn. The Linda Grant Center was the 3rd facility they'd opened in 6 months. 2 more were under construction in Philadelphia and Detroit. Each center offered free psychological counseling, psychiatric care, group therapy, and crisis intervention. No insurance required, no questions asked, no one turned away. It had taken every ounce of Preston's influence and Aaliyah's expertise to make it happen. The board had fought them at every step, but Preston had been relentless. He'd restructured Whitfield Industries from the ground up, redirecting resources, cutting executive bonuses, and personally funding the initial construction costs. Ready to go inside? Aaliyah asked. Preston nodded and walked through the doors without hesitation. No cane today. His legs had grown stronger with each passing month, fueled by purpose he hadn't felt in years. The waiting room was already full. A mother with 2 young children, an elderly veteran staring at his hands, a teenage girl with fresh bruises on her arms, people who needed help and couldn't afford to pay for it. Dr. Carter, a young therapist, rushed over. We're at capacity already, and we've only been open 3 hours. We might need to add evening sessions sooner than we planned. Then we'll add them, Aaliyah said immediately. No one gets turned away. That's the rule. Preston watched his daughter move through the center, greeting patients, checking in with staff radiating the same warmth and competence Linda must have shown during her nursing shifts. He'd missed 25 years of her life, but he was determined to be present for every moment going forward. A middle-aged man in the corner caught Preston's attention. He sat hunched over face in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Preston walked over and sat down beside him. Rough day. The man looked up startled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He stopped, recognition dawning. You're Preston Whitfield. I've seen you on the news. Just Preston. He leaned back in the chair. And you are? David Morrison. The man wiped his eyes roughly. I lost my job 3 months ago. My wife left, took the kids. I've been sleeping in my car. I thought about... His voice broke. I thought about ending it, but then I saw the flyer for this place. Free counseling. I figured, what did I have to lose? Preston felt his chest tighten. A year ago, he would have written this man a check and moved on, never understanding the depth of his pain. But Aaliyah had taught him that money couldn't fix everything. Sometimes people just needed to be seen to be heard. I'm glad you came, Preston said quietly. My daughter, the doctor who runs this place, she's brilliant at helping people carry the weight when it gets too heavy. She helped me. What could someone like you need help with? Grief, loss, guilt that nearly killed me. Preston met David's eyes. I spent 3 years in a wheelchair because I couldn't face what I'd done to the people I loved. Money doesn't insulate you from pain, David. It just makes it easier to hide from. They sat in silence for a moment. Then David asked, did it get better, the grief? It got different, less sharp, more manageable. But it took work and time and letting people help me. Preston stood and offered his hand. You're in the right place. Keep coming back. David shook his hand, some of the desperation leaving his face. Thank you. As Preston walked away, he felt Aaliyah's eyes on him. She smiled proud, warm, grateful. He smiled back. This was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or overnight transformations, but small moments of connection, one conversation at a time. Over the following months, Preston became a regular presence at all 3 centers. He'd arrive early before Aaliyah's shift started and sit in the waiting rooms talking to patients. He learned their names, their stories, their struggles. The billionaire veneer he'd worn for 60 years crumbled, completely replaced by genuine empathy. You're getting good at this, Aaliyah told him one evening as they walked through the Detroit facility together. Mrs. Patterson told me you spent an hour listening to her talk about her late husband. She needed someone to remember him with her. That's all. Preston paused by a window overlooking the street. I'm learning what you've always known, that listening is the most powerful thing we can offer sometimes. You sound like a therapist. I learned from the best. He put his arm around her shoulders. Your mother would be so proud of you, Aaliyah, of what you've built here. We built it together. She leaned into his side. This is our legacy, Dad. Not money or buildings or corporate empires. This. 6 months later, they stood at St. Mary's Hospital for another unveiling. A bronze memorial statue of Linda Grant in her nurse's uniform holding the hand of a patient. The plaque read, Linda Grant, RN, 1968 to 2021. She saw every person as worthy of dignity, compassion, and care. This memorial honors her life of service and sacrifice. Ruby stood between them, supported by a walker, but standing tall. She would have said this was too much fuss, that she was just doing her job. That's exactly why she deserves it, Preston said, because she never sought recognition for the countless lives she touched. Hospital staff, former patients, and community members gathered around the statue. A young nurse laid flowers at its base. An elderly man saluted it. A woman with 2 children whispered thank you through her tears. The local news covered the ceremony. Then national outlets picked it up. The story of a billionaire finding his long-lost daughter and transforming his empire into a force for community healing resonated far beyond New York. Letters poured in from across the country, people sharing their own stories of loss and reconciliation of privilege, confronting injustice of families torn apart by prejudice, finding their way back together. You're becoming an inspiration, Gerald told Preston during a meeting at the main office. People magazine wants to do a feature. The Today Show wants an interview. 3 different publishers want book deals. Preston looked at Aaliyah, who sat across from him reviewing grant applications. What do you think? I think if it brings attention to mental health resources and encourages more people to seek help, we should do it. She set down her pen. But we do it on our terms. No sensationalizing, no exploitation, just the truth about what family means and how love can bridge any divide. They agreed to one major interview. The story that aired 3 months later showed Preston and Aaliyah working side by side at the Bronx Center, showed Ruby knitting in the corner while patients waited, showed the memorial statue at St. Mary S. But more importantly, it showed David Morrison, the man Preston had met in the waiting room, now working as a peer counselor at the center, using his own recovery to help others. It showed dozens of patients whose lives had been transformed by access to free mental health care. The interview ended with Preston's words, "My father taught me that wealth equals power, and power means control. But my daughter taught me something better, that true power is using your resources to lift others up. That's the only legacy worth leaving." Applications for the Linda Grant Scholarship Fund, which provided full rides to medical and psychology students from low-income backgrounds, tripled overnight. Whitfield Industries stock actually rose as investors recognized the long-term value of community investment. But the real measure of success came in smaller moments. The teenager who stopped cutting herself after 6 months of therapy. The veteran who finally slept through the night. The single mother who learned she wasn't failing just because she needed help. One evening, as Preston and Aaliyah locked up the Bronx Center together, she said, "We're making a difference, a real one." "Your mother made the difference 25 years ago," Preston replied. "We're just honoring what she started, the belief that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and helped regardless of their bank account." They walked to the car together, father and daughter, carrying forward a legacy of healing that would outlast them both. 5 years had passed since that day in Preston's study when a DNA test had changed everything. Aaliyah Carter Whitfield was now 30, and her name appeared regularly in psychology journals and on panels about community mental health. The Linda Grant Foundation operated 17 centers across 12 states, had trained over 200 therapists, and had served more than 50,000 patients who couldn't afford traditional care. But despite the accolades and recognition, Aaliyah still made time for what mattered most, the small moments of human connection that had started it all. Today was special. 5 years to the day since she'd walked into that coffee shop and sat down with a broken stranger in a wheelchair. Preston, now 70, waited for her at their usual table. His hair had gone completely white, and he moved slower than before, but his eyes held a clarity and peace that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He no longer needed the cane his legs had fully recovered, as if his body had simply been waiting for his heart to heal first. "Right on time," he said as Aaliyah slid into the seat across from him. "I already ordered your chai latte." "You spoil me." She smiled, taking in the familiar setting. Same corner, same coffee shop, same afternoon light streaming through the windows. "I can't believe it's been 5 years. Best 5 years of my life." Preston reached across and squeezed her hand. Ruby would have loved to be here today. Aaliyah's smile wavered. Her grandmother had passed away 8 months ago, peacefully in her sleep at Preston's estate. She'd lived long enough to see the first Linda Grant Center open, long enough to watch Preston and Aaliyah become a real family, long enough to know that Linda's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "She's here," Aaliyah said softly, "in everything we do, just like Mom." They sipped their drinks in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon crowd flow through the shop. Students with laptops, business people on phone calls, young mothers with strollers. Life continuing in all its chaotic beauty. Then Aaliyah noticed him, a teenage boy, maybe 15 or 16, wearing a coffee shop uniform. He was supposed to be wiping down tables, but he'd stopped in the far corner, slumped in a chair with his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent crying. Aaliyah's therapist instincts kicked in immediately. She recognized the posture, the isolation, the desperate attempt to hide pain in a public space. "Do you see him?" she murmured to Preston. "I do." Preston's eyes were gentle. "He looks like I did 5 years ago, like someone who's carrying too much alone." Aaliyah stood grabbing her cup. "I'll be right back." She crossed the coffee shop slowly, giving the boy time to notice her approach. He looked up quickly, wiping his eyes and trying to compose himself. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll get back to work." "Don't worry about that." Aaliyah gestured to the empty chair. "Can I sit with you for a moment? You look like you could use some company." The boy stared at her, confusion and wariness fighting across his face. "I don't know you." "No, you don't. But I know what it's like to feel alone in a crowded room. I know what it's like to hurt so much you can't see a way forward." She sat down anyway, her voice gentle. "I'm Aaliyah. What's your name?" "Marcus." He hesitated, then added, "Why do you care?" "Because someone once cared enough to sit down with me when I needed it most, and it changed my life." She took a sip of her latte. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I can just sit here while you take a breath. Sometimes that's enough." Marcus's tough exterior cracked slightly. "My dad kicked me out last night, said I was a disappointment, that I'd never amount to anything. I slept in the subway and came straight to work this morning because I didn't know where else to go." Aaliyah's heart clenched. "That's a lot to carry by yourself. I'm sorry you're going through this." "It's whatever." But his voice betrayed him. Shaking with emotion, he was trying desperately to suppress. "It's not whatever," Aaliyah said firmly but kindly. "You're 15 years old, and you deserve better than sleeping in the subway. You deserve to be safe and supported." "Yeah, well, the world doesn't work that way." "Sometimes it does. Sometimes people show up exactly when you need them." She pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. "I run a community center in the Bronx. We have counseling, crisis resources, temporary housing assistance. No cost, no judgment. Would you let me help you?" Marcus looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." "Because 5 years ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop when I noticed a man who looked like his whole world had collapsed. I didn't know him either, but something told me he needed someone to see him, to acknowledge his pain. So I sat down and we talked." She smiled at the memory. "That conversation changed both our lives. He became my father, the father I'd never known I had. Together we built something meaningful out of our shared grief, all because I listened to that instinct that said someone needed help. That's a nice story, but nothing Marcus. Every person deserves to be seen, to be heard, to know they're not carrying their burden alone. Aaliyah slid her business card across the table. Take this. Come to the center tomorrow. We'll figure out what you need, whether that's counseling, housing help, or just a safe place to exist for a while. Marcus picked up the card, staring at it like it might disappear. I don't have money to pay for any of this. You don't need money. You just need courage to show up. Can you do that? He nodded slowly, tucking the card into his pocket. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Aaliyah stood. And Marcus, your father was wrong. You're not a disappointment. You're a young man dealing with an impossible situation, and you're still standing. That takes strength most adults don't have. For the first time since she'd sat down, Marcus smiled, small, fragile, but real. Thank you. Thank you for letting me sit with you. She squeezed his shoulder gently and walked back to her table. Preston was watching with tears in his eyes. You did for him what you did for me. I did what needed to be done, what someone would have done for Mom if she'd had the chance to ask for help. Aaliyah sat back down, emotionally drained but satisfied. He'll come to the center. I can feel it. And you'll be there to help him, just like you helped me. Preston reached across the table and took both her hands. I'm so proud of you. Not because you're successful or accomplished, but because you've never lost that instinct, the one that makes you stop and see people others walk past. You taught me that too, Dad. You taught me that it's never too late to choose compassion over convenience, connection over comfort. They finished their drinks and prepared to leave. As they walked toward the door, Preston glanced back at Marcus, who was now wiping down tables, but moving with slightly less weight on his shoulders. Outside, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the street. Preston put his arm around Aaliyah's shoulders as they walked to the car. Your mother would be so proud, he said quietly, of the woman you've become, of the lives you've changed, of the legacy you're building. Our legacy, Aaliyah corrected. This is all of us, Mom. You, Grandma Ruby, every person who chose kindness when they could have chosen indifference. Preston stopped walking and turned to face his daughter fully. I spent 60 years chasing wealth and power, thinking they would fill the emptiness inside me. But the only thing that ever truly healed me was love. Your mother's love, the love that exists in simple moments of human connection. That's the real miracle, isn't it? Aaliyah smiled. Not the money or the centers or the awards. Just the act of sitting down with someone and saying, I see you. You're not alone. They reached the car, but before getting in, Preston looked back at the coffee shop one more time. Through the window, he could see Marcus talking to another young employee, his posture more open, his expression lighter. The circle continues, Preston murmured. It always does. Aaliyah agreed. Kindness doesn't end with one act. It ripples outward, touching lives we'll never know, about creating connections we'll never see. That's the power of just showing up for another human being. As they drove away, the coffee shop behind them buzzed with afternoon activity. Marcus would come to the center tomorrow. Aaliyah would help him find housing, get into therapy, maybe even reconcile with his father, or build a new family of chosen people who saw his worth. And somewhere down the line, Marcus would sit down with another hurting soul and offer them the same compassion he'd been shown. The circle would continue ever widening, ever growing, built on the simple truth that kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a heart willing to sit down and listen. That was Linda's legacy. That was Preston's redemption. That was Aaliyah's gift to the world. And it all started with a single question asked in a crowded coffee shop. Can I sit with you? Sometimes the most extraordinary miracles come from the most ordinary moments of human decency. Sometimes all it takes is someone brave enough to see another person's pain and say, you don't have to carry this alone. That's the real magic. That quote as what changes the world.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.